So the head coach position at Michigan has opened up, and I never really thought Sharon Moore was a long term guy with Michigan, but with what's happened recently, it kind of gave Michigan an easy way out to terminate his job. And some candidates, some early candidates right away that I think are going to be in play with this position is Kenny Dillingham, Eli Drinkwitz, Jeff Brom, Kyle Whittingham, and Clark Lee. And I think that's a good list of candidates there. Kenny Dillingham looks to be the top target. I know there was a lot of talk about Kalen DeBoer maybe leaving Alabama, but I don't think that's a place that you just walk out of abruptly like that. So, what are your thoughts on the Michigan job coming up?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty out of the blue when the firing came, but like you said, if you listen to especially Michigan fans, I don't think Sharon Moore was ever viewed as like, yeah, he's the long term guy that's gonna take us to more national championships or anything. So this, I mean, really, I think they found a way to get out of that deal with him, and the only issue with them is kind of the timing of it. And I mean, the coaching carousel was crazy this year, but it kind of had all settled down already, and they have to either poach a guy from somewhere that's already there or already at a team, or they got to look at the NFL or something. There's been a lot of questions about how good a job the Michigan job really is. I think right now it's taken a hit just because of recent scandals. I mean, it's been since 2021, 22 now where they've had question marks about what's going on up there. I mean, with different sports too. And so that's kind of a big part of it, maybe not being like this prime job that it has been at other times in history, but I still think it's a top 3 job in the Big Ten and easily top 10 job in the country. So whatever coach goes there is going to get plenty of resources behind him. It's looking like right now most likely he's going to be Kenny Dillingham. I mean, he's been more leaving his thoughts open when people ask him about it in interviews and stuff, and not really straight up saying I'm staying at Arizona State, where Kalen DeBoer made a whole statement saying I'm staying at Alabama, I'm happy here. And so I think the Kalen DeBoer stuff was more excitement from Michigan fans early, and now they're looking somewhere more like Kenny Dillingham, most likely.
Yeah, I definitely agree that the whole DeBoer talk was definitely hopeful thoughts from the Michigan fans. But I kind of put together a top 10 places to coach in the Big Ten once I thought about the Michigan job being open, about what kind of job it is. And I would say Ohio State is definitely the best job in the Big Ten, maybe even in the country. I'll put Oregon at number 2. Michigan is the third best job to me, behind or in front of Penn State. Then I got USC, Washington, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Michigan State, and Iowa as the number 10 job in the Big Ten.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the top jobs in the country, and if they get the right guy in and get the right culture set in, they 100% can compete for championships. Another possibility that's kind of on the outside but could happen for them is they just roll with Biff as an interim for a year, and they kind of let things settle, figure things out in their athletic department, and then they come back in 2027 at the beginning of the coaching carousel where they got more open options, and they more reestablish themselves there. So that could be something else that plays out with the Michigan head coaching job.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised that they didn't immediately try to replace Sharon after he became the interim coach there for a little bit. But yeah, we'll see what happens with that one. Now we're gonna move on to just some general playoff talk here. And I got some things to say about this one as a Notre Dame fan. I'm not trying to argue that they should have been in over Miami or Alabama or anything like that. I just think it should be the 12 best teams or the 12 top-ranked teams instead of putting some G5 teams in like Tulane or JMU. I don't really think very many people want to watch Tulane versus Ole Miss or JMU versus Oregon, and think about the matchups of Notre Dame versus Ole Miss, Notre Dame versus Oregon, Texas versus Ole Miss, Texas versus Oregon, Vanderbilt versus Ole Miss, Vanderbilt versus Oregon. These would be much better matchups, and the playoff committee is always looking for money, and that is one of the ways that it would even bring in more money. I just don't really see why this was the setup and how it got to this. But yeah, I just think it would be much better if they just put the top 12 teams in instead of all this kind of bullshit that they have going on at the moment.
Yeah, I have literally written down here group of 5 automatic bids with a question mark. Like, I feel like a lot of the problems of where certain teams were mad they didn't get in this year would be eliminated without the way the automatic bids are set up right now. I think that there is a space where a group of 5 team could be good enough to get in if they go undefeated and they are a top 12 team, but I think given the number 24 team or whatever they are in the rankings, the automatic bid, it just kind of defeats the purpose of the playoff, like where you're looking for the 12 best teams to get a shot at a national championship. And so, yeah, I agree with what you're saying there. I think there's a lot of people that were looking at this kind of the wrong way, where they were trying to find ways to, like, Notre Dame should have been in over, they say over Alabama or over Miami, but I think that's more the angle where I'm mad about it is if these automatic bids aren't here for the number 24 or 21 team in the country, then we don't have these problems, and you're only leaving out Texas or Vanderbilt or whatever, and no matter what, there's going to be 1 or 2 teams that are upset. So,
Yeah, I completely agree. It's just tough to not see guys like Jeremiah Love, uh, Pavia, or any of Texas's guys in the playoff when you know that they would put up more of a fight than JMU or Tulane. And I could be wrong. JMU and Tulane could go in and get a win, but I definitely don't see them making any sort of run deep into the playoffs. And that brings us to the first playoff game that's going to take place tomorrow night on Friday at 8 o'clock. Alabama goes to Oklahoma. My opening thoughts about this one. In the first game, Bama had 3 turnovers, only lost the game by 2 points. They outgained Oklahoma by 200 yards. They outrushed them by a couple of yards, which Bama really hasn't done to anybody. John Mateer overall has just kind of been a disappointment for me. He was one of the guys that I thought was going to be at the Heisman ceremony. He only put up 150 yards in the last time these two teams played. And I think Bama has the talent to beat anybody if they have their best day. And without turnovers, I think Bama would have won that game against Oklahoma the first time. So give me Alabama to win this game and to move on.
yeah, if you look at like teams, I feel like a lot of people are looking for a team that can do what Ohio State did last year, where you just get hot and all of a sudden click and you go on a run to win it here at the end. And I think Alabama is more that team compared to Oklahoma in this matchup. Like Reg alluded to, the stat differential was pretty crazy in this last game, where Bama more than doubled them up in total yards, and Oklahoma had, I mean, even when they did score on offense and get or even kick points in, they had real short fields from either special teams or defense. So the field was really tilted on its edge most of the game. I believe the stat was that Alabama didn't start anywhere past their own 25 the whole game. So their offense was backed up deep the whole time. I think there's holes here. Oklahoma has had games where they've given up over 300 passing yards a couple times. So I believe Tennessee got them on one is one I can think of. So there's holes there for Alabama to throw the ball well again. If I look at the keys to the game for Alabama, I got passing yards again. Just load up on the passing yards, find holes in the Oklahoma defense. That way you're not going to be able to run the ball on them, and there's not really a point in trying to force it and wasting plays there. I think get your best athletes in space, and that's where they have them. And eliminate the turnovers from the last game. You can't have 3 turnovers and win a road playoff game. So eliminating those turnovers, same passing success, and I think the Alabama offense can play well. For Oklahoma, the keys to the game is going to be, again, forced turnovers. If you watch the last game, they were going for those turnovers. They were stripping the ball, and they were jumping routes, and it wasn't just Alabama making mistakes. Oklahoma did force those. So if they can find a way to do that again, that would be key. And then John Mateer as well is the big key, where he's kind of been slowly trying to get healthy since early in the season, but like Reg said, he's been a bit disappointing overall. And I think if you look at it overall, Bama's just the better team, and they'll come out this time. I got them winning 24-17.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun one in Norman. The next game is Miami at Texas A&M. I think this is unfortunate that this is a noon game. I think this would be a great night game, but unfortunately they put it at noon. Still going to be a very tough place to play. Probably the loudest this stadium will ever get or has ever gotten, and it gets crazy in this game. I heard Nick Saban talking earlier today about how he couldn't even hear himself think when he played there at Alabama, so it's going to be tough for anybody, especially Miami, in the playoffs. I think this is a very tough game to pick. Statistically, they're very similar teams. Both offenses have a good amount of weapons, but I think A&M has just a few more weapons than Miami with Craver and Concepcion out there to catch the ball. I think this will be a fun game. I think if either side gets a turnover or two, that'll be the game right there. And I think this will be a really close game. But give me Texas A&M to win.
Yeah, this might be the best game of the first round besides depending on what happens in the Alabama-Oklahoma game. There's definitely a better chance of more points being put up by both these teams. And like Reg said, they're extremely similar stat-wise. There's no real stat advantages either direction. I feel like they're pretty similar built teams. They both have good front sevens. They have good offenses with some good skill guys and a solid quarterback. Another big similarity, I feel like the quarterbacks are either they're going to turn the ball over a bunch and have a real bad day, or they have the potential to put up Heisman numbers on any day. So if you look at the keys to the game for Miami, I think it's pass protection, giving Carson Beck plenty of time to be comfortable back there and hit guys like Malachi Toney in space and let them run and get open and kill some of that crowd momentum that Texas A&M is going to have. And that also leads to their other key that I have here is just Carson Beck plays efficiently and doesn't turn over the ball. I think that'll be very important for them. And for both sides, the key is front seven play. They both have guys that are NFL-type guys on their front sevens, and whichever one of those front sevens I think wreaks the most havoc is going to be the one that makes the difference and wins this game. They can force turnovers. They can stop the run game on either side and force them to throw the ball 35, 40 times, and that can become trouble for either of these quarterbacks too. So in the end, I think Miami's guys that they've got on that front seven, they've just got some freaks up there. They got some great receivers that I think can get in space on A&M. They can force a few turnovers from Marcel Reed. And I see Miami beating Texas A&M 28-20 and getting a big road win.
Yeah, that's the one game that I would want to be at this week if I could pick any game to go to. That place is going to be rocking. The next game is Tulane going to Ole Miss. This game already happened, and we all know how it went, but Ole Miss favored by 17.5 points as of now. I think this game is likely to go how it went earlier in the season. Trinidad Chambliss had a Heisman-type game in the previous matchup. 307 through the air, 2 touchdowns passing, and 112 rushing yards, so he just kind of torched them, and it was over quickly in that game. And I think with Summerall kind of being wearing 2 hats at the moment, it's going to be kind of hard for the team to focus as a whole. And I'm going to take Ole Miss to win and cover the 17.5.
Yeah, some people in this game, you could look at the Ole Miss situation with Lane Kiffin leaving as a negative, but I think at least in this first game of the playoffs, it might turn into a positive for them. They got the home game. I think their crowd's going to be extremely fired up. Their players are going to be fired up behind Pete Golding, who's the new head coach there, their former defensive coordinator behind Lane Kiffin. So I think in this first round game, that all kind of plays to their advantage, honestly. Tulane's going to have the mental disadvantage of getting waxed by them earlier in the year. And like Reg said, in that game, Ole Miss was up early and often. They just got on them, and there really wasn't ever a chance. I think that's the main key where Tulane has a chance in this game is if they can stop a quick start from Ole Miss, maybe force a turnover early and get some quarterback run game going with Retzlaff and maybe control the ball just a little bit. And if you get into the half where it's within 10 points or so, then you got a chance there. But I really don't see that happening. I see Ole Miss coming out fired up, and I don't think much is going to be different from the last time they played in Oxford. And I see Ole Miss winning about 41-17 and covering the 17.5 point spread.
I can see it already. Some big, fat, rich white guy up in the press box. Tulane gets up 2 scores, starts sweating. But, yeah, that probably won't happen. But that's just something I was thinking about that might be a little bit funny. The next game is JMU at Oregon. 20.5 is what the game is currently at. I think Oregon is going to cover that 20.5 and maybe even double it. But JMU has pretty good defense statistically. They're top 15 in both run and pass defense, but they haven't really played any teams that have been much of a challenge to really expose that defense. And the best team they've played so far is Louisville, and they lost 28-14. Yeah, that was in week 2, but that is the best team they've played. They've kind of dominated against most of the Sun Belt teams that they've played, But I don't see Lanning and Oregon looking past JMU, and I see the Ducks winning big.
Yeah, James Madison, as their strength of schedule was somewhere in the hundreds, I believe. In that game against Louisville, they were winning going into the third, but then from there, Louisville just kind of took over. And that's the type of thing where I think it shows Oregon's the team that can just take over right away. I think Oregon, like Ole Miss, has some extra motivation coming in here, even though they're playing a group of 5 team. They got you could call this a big tune-up game for a big game against Texas Tech coming up. I think Dan Lanning and their coaching staff are going to be extremely motivated after the way their playoffs went last year, where they just got one game and Ohio State waxed them and they were done. So I think they got some extra motivation from that sense too, where they want to get back and get a shot at a team like Ohio State and maybe look for some revenge. To me, Oregon all year has been one of I would call them the sleeping giants of college football. I think they're one of those teams that can explode here and hit a whole nother level that we haven't really seen yet this year, besides maybe once or twice in there. And I think this is the first game where they do it. I think Lanning comes out, has them fired up, and they just take control physically and space, and I think they're just better all over the field. And they pretty well dominate and cover the 20.5 points.
So now we're going to predict the entire bracket and see how close or how awful we can be at predicting the entire playoffs. So in the first game, at the top of my bracket, that I'm looking at here, I got Oregon beating JMU. I got Alabama beating Oklahoma, Ole Miss beating Tulane, and Texas A&M beating Miami. But you guys already heard that. And then in the second round, I got Oregon beating Texas Tech, Alabama beating Indiana, which might be a surprise to some people. I got Georgia beating Ole Miss, and Ohio State beating Texas A&M. And then we get to the Final Four here. So it's going to be Oregon against Alabama, and I have Alabama going to the national championship against Ohio State, who I have beating Georgia in the Final Four. And then I have Alabama and Ohio State in the national championship, and I'm going to take Ohio State. I think if Ohio State, out of any team in the country, if they play their best game, if every team in the country plays their best game, I see Ohio State beating everybody.
Yeah, so I feel like we've got pretty similar brackets in that sense, where I definitely agree. If we get all these teams playing at their best and everybody plays out at their best, I would see the Buckeyes doing the same thing. If I go through my bracket here, if I go first round, I got Oregon over JMU, Alabama over Oklahoma, Ole Miss handling Tulane, and then I got Miami winning on the road against Texas A&M. Then in the second round games, Oregon and Texas Tech, I think Texas Tech will be outmatched in that one, and Oregon will win by a couple scores. I got, just like Reg, I got Alabama beating Indiana in that second round game. And then Georgia beating Ole Miss and Ohio State beating Miami. And then in the Final Four, which I think is a great Final Four with Oregon versus Alabama and Georgia versus Ohio State, I got the Ducks beating Alabama by a touchdown or so. Ohio State narrowly escaping Georgia by about a field goal. And then moving into that national championship game and having Oregon versus Ohio State, where Oregon will be looking for that revenge like I referenced earlier, and I think they'd be pretty fired up coming to that one. But like Reg and I have already said, I trust the Buckeyes at their best this year, and I got them pulling it out in a great game against Oregon in the national championship.
Yeah, some of the hardest games to choose for me were the Final Four game of Oregon and Alabama or Indiana. The Bama and Indiana one was even hard for me to choose. And then Oregon versus Indiana or Oregon versus Bama was also very hard for me to choose. I actually, when I first made the bracket, had Oregon and Ohio State in the national championship, just like you. But I have some sort of blind confidence in Bama that they'll just kind of turn it on at some point, and that's why I got them making the national championship game.
Yeah, I'm in a very similar thought process there, where the hardest games were that Bama-Indiana game, the Oregon-Bama game, and then those last two Ohio State games with Ohio State-Georgia and Ohio State-Oregon. I think Georgia, Oregon, and Ohio State, to me, are probably the three teams that I have the highest potential in.
We'll see how it all plays out, and we'll see how many we can get wrong, or if we just completely fuck the whole thing up. But that's pretty much all we got for you guys this week. We will see you next week.